So usually, we tend to keep the world in these neat, carefully labeled little boxes.
Right, yeah. It's comforting.
Yeah, exactly. Over here, you have biology,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
And that box is just filled with, cells, animals, forests,
All the messy organic stuff.
all the messy, breathing, organic stuff of life. And then over there, in a completely separate box, you have economics.
Which is, I mean, people treat that as totally different.
Totally different. That one holds
Yeah.
money, stock markets, interest rates, these massive corporations. We treat one as a natural science of living things, and the other is this like purely human-made architecture of math and finance.
And it is incredibly comforting to keep them separated like that. Segmenting reality just makes the staggering complexity of the world feel, well, manageable.
Yeah, manageable.
We like to believe that the rules governing a forest ecosystem have, absolutely nothing to do with the rules governing the New York Stock Exchange.
Right. But then you open up the text we are exploring today for this deep dive, and Guillermo Brand Deisler just takes those carefully labeled boxes and throws them straight into a blender.
He really does.
In his work, Economics Under Uncertainty, he asks this terrifyingly simple question. What if a multinational corporation and, like, a rabbit dodging a fox in a field are driven by the exact same biological panic?
It's this wild premise.
It is. What if economics isn't just a science of money, and biology isn't just a science of organic matter, but rather they are the exact same thing, just systems desperately trying to survive a future they simply cannot predict?
That is the core provocation of the whole text. Deisler doesn't just challenge our conventional economic or biological models. He basically sidesteps them entirely to look at the absolute bare metal foundation of how any system survives time.
Right.
But to get there, we have to do some severe unlearning. Like, we have to completely dismantle our rigid definitions of what an individual or a living thing actually is.
Which is so much harder than it sounds. I mean, our brains are hardwired to draw boundaries.
Oh, absolutely.
Deisler points out that we use concepts like matter, life, time, individual, with what he calls operational familiarity.
Yes. Operational familiarity.
Meaning, we know how to use the words in a sentence, we know how to navigate the world using them, but we don't actually grasp what they mean at their core.
It's like driving a car, right?
Yeah.
You have operational familiarity with the steering wheel.
Exactly.
But that doesn't mean you understand the thermodynamics of an internal combustion engine.
Right. We use language to draw circles around things. Reason itself tends to simplify and reduce reality so our minds can actually grasp it. We draw a circle and say, this is the thing.
But Deisler argues that this very act of categorization creates massive blind spots. And he uses the problem of the cellular boundary to illustrate how reason kind of traps us.
Okay, yes, the cellular boundary problem. Let's really dig into this because, honestly, it blew my mind.
It's a great example.
We all accept that a single biological cell is alive, right? We look at it under a microscope, we see the lipid bilayer,
The membrane.
the membrane, and because there is a physical boundary, we point at it and say, okay, the life is happening inside that tiny little wall.
But then, you scale it up. Look at a complex multicellular organism. Look at a human being or a dog or, I don't know, a whale. You are composed of trillions of individual living cells.
Trillions, yeah.
Each of those isolated cells has its own life, its own metabolic processes. Yet, we universally agree that you, the macroorganism, also have a life.
Right.
So Deisler asks this seemingly simple question. Where exactly is the life of the organism located?
And I found myself genuinely stuck on that question when I was reading because you can't point to it.
No, you can't.
It's not like there's a glowing ethereal orb sitting in your chest cavity that contains your organism life, right? If I point to your arm, I'm just pointing at billions of individual cell lives.
Exactly. You cannot isolate it because the life of the organism isn't in one specific physical place. It is an emergent configuration.
An emergent configuration.
Yeah, it's a result of the dynamic aggregation coordination of all those smaller units. The physical boundary, like your skin, it suggests that you are a singular, solid unit, but it doesn't actually resolve the problem of what that life is.
Because the skin is just another layer of cells.
Exactly.
It makes me think of drawing borders on a map of the ocean.
Oh, that's a good analogy.
Like we draw a line and say, okay, this is the Pacific and this is the Atlantic. We draw the lines to feel better, to make shipping routes easier to negotiate, but the water doesn't care about our lines.
Right. The ocean is just a continuous moving dynamic.
The currents just flow right through the lines.
Yeah, it's a great starting point, but we have to push that analogy further to grasp Deisler's real point. It's not just that the borders are arbitrary.
Right.
It's that obsessing over the borders prevents you from understanding the currents. Once you stop obsessing over what a defined entity is and start analyzing what a configuration does, the entire concept of evolution and survival changes shape.
Okay, so that brings us to Darwin's finches.
Yeah.
Which the text uses to shatter another one of our preconceived notions.
Yeah, this is a big one.
Because we usually tell the story of evolution as this grand upward staircase of progress. Like there is a master plan to build the perfect bird.
And Deisler emphasizes that evolution contains zero prior intention. There is no goal.
No endpoint.
No teleological drive toward perfection. None of that. Look at the Galapagos finches. An environmental shift happens. Maybe a drought that leaves only large, hard seeds.
Okay.
Random variations occur in the genetic configuration of the birds. Some finches are just born with deeper, stronger beaks. That specific configuration manages to access the hard seeds, and thus it sustains its continuity.
Right, it gets the energy.
It gets the energy. The birds with the narrow beaks cannot access the energy, and so their configuration fails.
And the text makes a point here that feels almost, I don't know, violently counterintuitive.
Extinction.
Extinction. It's not an anomaly. It's not a glitch in the biological matrix. Extinction is a constitutive structural part of the dynamic itself.
Yes. Continuity is never, ever guaranteed for any system. Whether you are a finch relying on a specific seed or a massive tech company relying on a specific microchip supply chain, uncertainty is the only constant.
The environment is always shifting.
Always. A configuration might work beautifully, flawlessly for 1,000 years. Then the environment shifts, the parameters change, and if the system cannot reconfigure, it ceases to exist.
So if we accept that we strip away our artificial boundaries and accept that there is no inherent life essence, just these temporary configurations trying to survive, how do we even define what a system is?
Right. What are the actual rules?
Yeah. If everything is just a temporary arrangement of parts, what are the universal rules for a system to exist over time?
Well, this is where we have to do a strict model reconstruction of Deisler's framework.
Yeah.
This is mandatory before we can evaluate anything else. Deisler strips reality down to a minimal structural framework.
Okay. Break it down for me.
He identifies 4 absolute pillars of survival that apply to any system, regardless of whether it's made of carbon or capital. The first pillar is action.
Action, meaning systems intervene in their environment.
Yes.
They modify conditions based on what they can effectively access. So like
Sure.
a plant turns toward the sun or a company launches a marketing campaign.
Exactly. That is action. But the second pillar qualifies the first, and this is crucial: uncertainty.
Uncertainty.
This action does not happen in a vacuum, and it never happens with omniscient knowledge. Action happens without full information.
Right. You never have all the facts.
When the system intervenes, the results of that intervention simply cannot be perfectly anticipated.
Which necessitates the third pillar, right? Memory.
Yes, memory. Systems must retain information, and the text is very, very careful to define this.
Right. We aren't talking about nostalgia here.
No, not conscious recollection. We are talking about operational retention.
Operational retention. So what does that actually mean in practice?
It means that without it, every single action would start from absolute zero. If a system learns how to extract energy from its environment but cannot store the architecture of that process, it dies the next day.
Wow.
Memory is the stabilized structure that actually guides the action through the fog of uncertainty. DNA is memory. A corporate standard operating procedure is memory.
That makes so much sense. And then the fourth pillar is the ultimate objective, right?
Yeah.
Continuity.
Continuity, the capacity to sustain operation over time.
And this is where the tension of the entire text lies. Because every time you take an action, you commit present resources, energy, capital, time, without any mathematical guarantee that you will recover them.
Right. And to ground this, the text uses a highly specific mechanical example.
The rabbit and the fox.
The rabbit trying to survive the presence of a fox. Let's look at the mechanisms explicitly established here.
Yeah, I want to break this down frame by frame because the mechanics are fascinating. So the rabbit detects the fox.
Right.
It does not have complete information.
Right.
It doesn't know the fox's top speed. It doesn't know exactly when the fox will lunge. Doesn't know what the fox is thinking.
That's the uncertainty.
But the rabbit must act.
So it relies on memory, its biological instincts, its knowledge of the terrain where the burrows are located, and it initiates action. It runs.
But to act is to intervene without guarantees.
Right.
The act of running isn't a safe harbor.
No. Running actually exposes the rabbit.
Tremendously. The rabbit is committing its stored caloric energy, its muscular capacity, and its physical position to an uncertain outcome.
Yes. If it runs and stumbles on a hidden route, its capacity for future action immediately decreases. It has spent energy and gained nothing but vulnerability.
See, I kept struggling with this while reading.
Else.
If action always exposes the system to danger, if running risks a broken ankle or exhaustion, why wouldn't the optimal survival strategy be to just do nothing? Why not freeze? I mean, playing dead is a biological strategy.
It is, but playing dead is still an action.
Wait, really?
Structurally, yes. It is a highly organized configuration of memory slowing the heart rate, stiffening the muscles deployed as an intervention in the environment.
Well, I see.
True inaction, doing absolutely nothing in a continuously changing environment, is the singular thing that guarantees the loss of continuity.
Because the environment is dynamic.
Exactly. The fox is still moving. Entropy is still degrading the rabbit's cells. If the system does not continuously act to adjust its relationship to the environment, it will be consumed.
So the system has to bridge the gap between itself and the changing environment. And Deisler says it does this through information, but he redefines information. It's not just passive data.
No, information is the vital operative link. It allows the system to relate the state of the environment to its own survival.
So the rabbit processes the visual input of the fox, links it to the spatial memory of the terrain, and generates an action sequence.
Exactly. But here's the problem.
What's that?
If you just keep rolling the dice of uncertainty, if every action is a gamble where you might break your ankle or get eaten, eventually you lose.
Right. How does any system avoid eventually hitting snake eyes and collapsing?
This brings us to what might be the most profound conceptual breakthrough in the framework. The text introduces the impossibility of equivalence.
The impossibility of equivalence. Okay, so if you treat the future as a perfect one-to-one equivalent of the present, you will die.
Yes. We have to look at the physics of time here and how time is treated in this model. Deisler treats time as asymmetric.
Asymmetric, meaning it only goes one way and it's fundamentally different from the present.
Exactly. If you commit your resources today, assuming you are going to get an exact perfect restoration of those resources tomorrow, getting back exactly what you put in, no more, no less, the inherent uncertainty of the future will eventually destroy you.
Because the future is not just a neutral extension of the present.
Right. If the future were certain, equivalence would be a perfectly viable survival strategy. You spend 10 units of biological energy foraging, you find exactly 10 units of caloric energy in berries. Perfect balance.
But the future is uncertain. The environment changes. A competitor eats the berries, or the weather shifts.
Exactly. If you only ever organize your actions to achieve equivalence, the very first time you suffer a loss, your system degrades.
Okay, walk me through that degradation.
So you start with 10 units, you forage, but it's a bad day, you only get 9 back.
Right.
The next day you can only forage using 9 units of energy. You hit another bad outcome, now you have 7. The degradation compounds until continuity breaks.
Which means a system has to organize its action to generate a surplus. The text calls it the margin.
The margin. Deisler is incredibly strict about this definition. This margin is not a subjective preference.
It's not human greed.
It is not human greed. It is not a psychological flaw of capitalism. It is an operational law of physics and time. It is the necessary mathematical expression of the asymmetry between the present condition and an unpredictable future.
I was trying to map this onto everyday human behavior, so think about packing a suitcase for a trip.
Okay, I like this.
If you are going on a 3-day trip and you possess absolute 100% certainty about the future, you know it won't rain, you know you won't spill coffee on yourself, you know you won't sweat, you pack exactly 3 shirts.
That is equivalent.
That's equivalent,
Yes.
but you don't have that certainty. So you pack 5 shirts.
The shirt analogy is a great entry point, but let's push it to its structural conclusion.
Okay, push it.
Packing those extra 2 shirts isn't just a mental comfort, it has an immediate physical cost.
Oh, right. Space.
It takes up limited space in your suitcase, it adds weight you have to carry, it requires you to own more shirts than you immediately need. The margin always demands an upfront cost.
You are sacrificing present efficiency and carrying a burden specifically to defend against the fog of tomorrow.
Yes. And Deisler is arguing that this rule cuts across every single system in existence, from a single cell storing extra ATP to a rabbit storing fat for the winter.
To a human packing a suitcase, to a corporation holding cash reserves.
Whenever you build a buffer, keeping a spare tire in your car, saving money from your paycheck, leaving for the airport an hour early, you aren't just managing anxiety.
You are acting out a fundamental structural law of the universe.
You are organizing your action to incorporate a margin because you cannot guarantee equivalence.
Okay, I follow how a single system, one rabbit, one person packing a bag, requires memory and margin to survive. But reality isn't just isolated individuals.
No, it's highly complex.
What happens when multiple systems try to survive together? Margin works for one rabbit, but what happens when you have an entity composed of 10,000 people?
This is where we scale up to the emergence of the operational unit.
The operational unit.
Just as individual cells aggregate into a multicellular organism to better manage margin and uncertainty, human beings aggregate into larger configurations. We form legal systems, states, nations, and firms.
And the text makes a massive claim here. It states that a SERM, or a nation-state, is a true operational unit. It isn't a metaphor.
No, it operates under the exact same biological and structural laws as the rabbit.
Which is wild, because we usually fall back into the trap of our boundary-making reason when we look at a corporation.
We do. We look at a company and we just see a collection of its current employees.
Right. But a firm is not its employees. If you take a company founded in, say, 1950, every single original founder is gone.
Long gone.
The original employees have retired or died. The original headquarters was probably demolished. Their first product line is totally obsolete. Yet, legally, financially, and structurally, it is the exact same entity intervening in the market today. How is that biologically possible?
Well, we usually dismiss that as a legal fiction, but Deisler is saying it's a structural reality.
So what is actually being maintained?
What is maintained isn't the carbon, the human bodies, or the brick buildings. What is maintained is the architecture of memory.
The records.
The records, the standard operating procedures, the patents, the legal contracts, the corporate culture, the supply chain relationships. That stabilized structure is the memory of the macroorganism.
It's like the ship of Theseus.
Exactly like the ship of Theseus.
If every board is replaced, is it the same ship?
Yeah.
In economics, yes, because the memory and information architecture of the firm remains intact.
It allows the firm to retain information across generations of humans, to act in the present, and to project its need for margin into the future.
But the scale creates a terrifying new problem, because the firm isn't acting alone in a vacuum. It's interacting with millions of other firms and billions of individuals.
Right. Continuity is no longer an individual survival problem. It becomes a massive, chaotic coordination problem.
Welcome to the distributed brain.
If firms and states are giant organisms, they are operating in an environment where information and capacities are completely fractured.
No single central entity can process it all. I mean, no CEO, no central planning committee, no AI supercomputer has the full picture of the environment in real time.
The information required to sustain continuity is distributed across the local knowledge of millions of different actors, and the capacity to act, the raw materials, the specific labor skills, the machinery is also geographically and operationally distributed.
So how do you coordinate the survival margins of millions of interconnected entities without a central nervous system dictating every move?
Deisler says the explicit mechanism for this coordination is the market.
The market. And we really have to pause here because in our culture, the market is an incredibly loaded term.
Extremely loaded.
People treat it as a political ideology.
But Deisler isn't making a political argument for free market capitalism. He is making a structural observation.
Right.
The market is an emergent form of coordination. It happens naturally when centralization fails or is physically impossible due to the sheer volume of distributed information.
But for a distributed, decentralized system to coordinate, it absolutely requires signals.
Yes. The entities need a way to communicate their need for margin. And the ultimate signal, what the text describes as the most highly compressed piece of information in the human universe, is price.
Price is condensed information. This fundamentally shifts how we view the economy. We usually think of a price as the inherent value of an object, or just, a sticker on a piece of copper pipe.
But structurally, a price is an operational signal that integrates millions of invisible, distributed variables.
It compresses weather patterns affecting mines, supply chain bottlenecks in shipping, human labor desires, and resource scarcity, all into a single actionable number.
I realized reading this why we get so emotionally attached to prices.
Yeah, we treat them as moral judgments. If the price of eggs goes up, we feel morally slighted, like the fundamental worth of an egg has been manipulated.
We react emotionally because price dictates our personal access to the margin we need to survive. But structurally, a price contains no morality. It is a gauge.
It's exactly like a dashboard warning light in your car.
Yes, perfect analogy.
When the engine temperature gauge spikes into the red, that little analog needle doesn't explain the thermodynamics of internal combustion.
No, it doesn't.
It doesn't tell you the specific viscosity of the oil that is failing. It just gives you a highly condensed signal. Pull over, or the system will suffer catastrophic loss of continuity.
That is the exact function of price. Prices allow multiple disconnected entities to adjust their behavior without needing to understand the whole system.
So if the price of copper suddenly doubles,
A manufacturer in Germany doesn't need to know that a specific mine in Chile flooded.
or that a new geopolitical treaty restricted exports,
Right. They just see the signal flash red. They know they must find a substitute material or raise their own prices to protect their firm's margin. They adjust their action sequence based entirely on the compressed signal.
and what happens when a firm ignores the signal or adjusts incorrectly?
This brings us to Deisler's view of competition and error. In a distributed market, competition is not warfare.
It's not warfare.
Structurally, no. It is the simultaneous parallel exploration of different survival configurations. Different firms try different ways of organizing their memory and actions to secure a margin.
Which means failure is inevitable.
Error, bankruptcy, and collapse are not anomalies or tragedies in the structural sense. Just like the finches that couldn't crack the hard seeds, failure is a required function of the system.
The market must weed out configurations that can no longer efficiently coordinate information and sustain a margin in the current environment.
Yes, but the text adds one more crucial layer to this distributed brain. The signals, the prices, are completely useless if you don't actually believe them.
Right. If the check engine light comes on, but you know your car has a faulty sensor that lies all the time, you just ignore the signal.
Exactly. Signals only coordinate action if entities believe the interactions will be fulfilled.
If I pay the price, will the shipping company actually deliver the copper?
If I deliver the copper, will the firm actually transfer the funds? This introduces the concept of credibility.
The text defines credibility, reputation, and social norms as stabilized memory.
We tend to think of trust and reputation as soft sociological concepts, like good public relations.
Right.
Deisler argues they are the literal structural memory of the market. Without credibility, the distributed brain suffers from amnesia.
The signals lose their anchor.
The entities refuse to commit resources because uncertainty becomes absolute and coordination collapses. Entities in a market aren't seeking perfect equivalence in an exchange. They are all trying to coordinate their required margin through a vast network built on stabilized memory.
Okay, so the price mechanism and credibility solve the problem of coordinating across space, right? Millions of actors distributed across the globe. But what about time?
Time is the ultimate complication.
Actions take time. Building a factory takes 5 years. How does the market synthesize uncertainty that hasn't even happened yet?
Now we are entering the domain of intertemporal coordination. And this brings us to what is arguably the most misunderstood, vilified concept in all of economics.
The interest rate.
The interest rate. To understand this, we have to go back to the fundamental asymmetry we discussed in the beginning. The present allows for direct, immediate action.
If you have a resource today, you can use it to intervene in your environment right now.
But the future does not allow for direct action. It is shrouded in impenetrable uncertainty. Therefore, there is a fundamental physical non-equivalence between a resource held today and that exact same resource held a year from now.
Because in that year, the fox could eat the rabbit. The company could go bankrupt. The currency could collapse. The future is inherently degraded by risk.
Exactly. So when multiple entities interact over time, when they engage in intertemporal decisions, this fundamental non-equivalence, this absolute need for a margin against the future, has to take on a quantified, explicit form.
The interest rate.
The interest rate is not an arbitrary financial invention created by central bankers. It is the mathematical expression of uncertainty.
It is margin mapped across time.
Exactly. Let's really dissect the mechanics of this. Think about a standard 30-year mortgage. When you take out a loan to buy a house, you aren't just engaging in a sterile financial transaction. Look at it from the perspective of the bank as a biological organism.
Right, the bank is a macro-organism.
The bank is committing its present, certain resources, hundreds of thousands of dollars to you, and in return, it gets a promise that you will pay it back over 360 months.
The bank is exposing itself to 360 months of pure uncertainty.
Yes, you could lose your job, the housing market could crash, inflation could skyrocket. Yeah. If the bank simply asks for equivalence, if they give you $300,000 and ask for exactly $300,000 back over 30 years, they would be destroyed by the entropy of time.
So the interest they charge is the biological panic of the institution trying to secure continuity. They're gathering margin against your uncertain future.
Precisely. Economics is not a separate domain from nature. The interest rate is the exact same structural mechanism as the rabbit storing extra fat for a harsh winter.
Or the traveler packing extra shirts for a trip.
It is simply the way complex, distributed social configurations coordinate the margin required to survive time.
It is an incredibly beautiful, unifying theory. But, I mean, if this structural mechanism, action, uncertainty, memory, margin, time, explains everything from a single cell to global interest rates, why did the greatest economists in history miss it?
Well, that is the ultimate test of any paradigm-shifting theory. And this is where the deep dive gets really rigorous.
Right.
Deisler doesn't just present his model in a vacuum. He actively engages in a comparative structural evaluation of the giants of economic thought.
He puts them through a rigorous structural stress test.
Yes. And to truly understand the power of Deisler's framework, we have to evaluate how these historical frameworks stack up based on extremely strict criteria.
Okay, let's lay out the rules for this evaluation first, so we're all on the same page.
Good idea. We have to look at how each thinker defined action, how they handled uncertainty, what mechanism they believed governed intertemporal decisions, and ultimately whether their models can survive what Deisler calls time compression.
And we are classifying each framework by its dominant function, right?
Yes. Strictly classifying them into 3 categories: describe, project, or explain.
Describe, project, or explain. And there's a really strict rule here about what counts as an explanation.
There is. A framework explains a structural process only if it explicitly identifies the relevant entities, the operative relations between them, the mechanism by which continuity is maintained or lost, and the conditions under which intertemporal decisions affect system stability.
If any of those elements is missing, the framework does not explain. It might describe or project, but it doesn't explain.
Exactly. And when we score them on a scale of 0 to 10 for explanatory depth, only frameworks classified as explain may score above a 7. Descriptions, equilibrium states, or projections do not increase this score.
Okay, let's start with the grandfather of modern economics, Adam Smith. Most of us know him for the invisible hand and the division of labor.
Right. Under Deisler's evaluation, we have to look at Smith's core mechanism. For Smith, action is characterized by specialization.
The famous pin factory example. One person draws a wire, another cuts it, another flattens the head.
Smith treats this primarily as a mechanical productivity hack, but Deisler reinterprets it structurally.
Division of labor isn't just about making more pins. It's a structural defense mechanism against distributed information.
Exactly. When a single entity tries to do everything, it faces immense friction and error because it lacks the required memory and capacity. Specialization allows action sequences to stabilize.
It consolidates memory into highly specific units, expanding the overall system's capacity to generate margin.
Yes. However, when we apply the strict criteria, how does Smith score?
Well, in terms of explanatory depth, Smith's model is fundamentally descriptive. He observes the mechanism, but his framework doesn't explicitly integrate the non-equivalence of the future.
Exactly. He describes the division of labor brilliantly. But time, for Smith, is largely neutral. He doesn't have an explicit mechanism governing intertemporal decisions under uncertainty.
So his dominant function is described.
Yes. And therefore, his explanatory depth score would be capped at 7 or below. He lacks the structural grounding of how time and uncertainty threaten continuity.
Okay, what about Karl Marx? Marx gives us the labor theory of value, the idea that the true value of a good is determined by the socially necessary labor time required to produce it. Now, full disclosure to you listening, we are impartially reporting these concepts. We're not endorsing any political ideology, just evaluating the structural frameworks exactly as they are written.
Right. And Marx's framework is fascinating structurally because he is actively seeking an objective equivalence.
He wants to anchor value in the physical reality of labor time.
But from Deisler's perspective, this is a fatal structural flaw.
Because equivalence is impossible.
Precisely. Marx's model assumes that equivalence can be achieved and measured, and that surplus value, what Marx calls exploitation, is a political anomaly to be corrected.
But Deisler argues that surplus the margin is a biological requirement for continuity.
Exactly. Furthermore, Marx treats time as structured, but ultimately deterministic. His framework projects a specific historical outcome.
So his dominant function is project.
Yes. He fails Deisler's structural grounding test because he refuses to accept uncertainty as an unresolvable constitutive part of the system. He thinks uncertainty can be engineered away through different social organization.
So on explanatory depth, he scores quite low because projecting an outcome without a mechanism for navigating ongoing uncertainty isn't an explanation.
Correct. Now, let's move to the dominant framework taught in universities today. Leon Walras and neoclassical economics.
This is the math-heavy world. Supply and demand curves, perfect competition, general equilibrium theory.
And this is where Deisler is perhaps the most critical. Neoclassical economics builds breathtakingly complex mathematical models.
Right.
But let's evaluate them on the structural criteria. How do they handle uncertainty?
They don't, right? They abstractly suspend it. They assume perfectly rational agents with perfect information.
It's like building an intricate model of ocean currents, but assuming the water never moves.
That's a huge blind spot.
They assume time is completely neutral and that the system naturally seeks a state of equilibrium where supply perfectly matches demand.
But equilibrium is a fantasy where the tension of survival is turned off.
Exactly. Real systems never reach equilibrium. They are in continuous, messy adjustment because they are always trying to secure a margin against an unknown tomorrow.
So what's their dominant function?
They are primarily describing an idealized state or projecting trends under artificial constraints
But they fundamentally cannot explain the mechanism of survival.
because they assume away the very thing threatening the system, the unknown future. In our evaluation, equilibrium does not count as a mechanism, so neoclassical economics scores very low on explanatory depth and structural grounding.
Which brings us to the two heavyweights of the 20th century, Friedrich Hayek and John Maynard Keynes. Deisler seems to think they both got massive pieces of the puzzle right, but missed the final synthesis.
Let's evaluate Hayek first. Hayek brilliantly identified the problem of distributed information.
Right. He recognized that no central planner could ever possess the necessary data to run an economy.
And that the price mechanism was the emergent solution? He scores incredibly high on explaining market coordination and price formation, so his primary function edges into explain.
But where does he fail this structural test?
Hayek is weak on intertemporal mechanisms and the absolute necessity of structured memory.
Okay, so he understood the signaling.
Yes, but he didn't fully integrate how systems must actively construct internal architecture's memory to survive the time between signals.
Got it. And Keynes. Keynes is famous for animal spirits, the idea that human emotion and unpredictable psychological factors drive markets.
Keynes nailed the reality of uncertainty. He understood the fog of the future and how it paralyzes action.
He recognized that intertemporal decisions are fraught with peril.
But Keynes missed the vital role of stabilized memory and credibility in overcoming that uncertainty. Without memory, the uncertainty Keynes described would simply disintegrate the system.
So his dominant function is described. He describes the panic, but lacks the full explanatory mechanism for continuity.
Exactly. So Hayek understood the spatial coordination of distributed information, and Keynes understood the temporal terror of uncertainty.
But neither fully grasped the mechanism that holds it all together.
Right. Deisler's framework, incorporating action, uncertainty, memory, margin, and continuity, unites them all.
And the ultimate proof of this framework's explanatory depth comes when we apply the final evaluation criterion.
The capacity to model time compression.
Time compression. What exactly does that mean in this context?
Think about the modern world. Algorithmic, high-frequency trading, just-in-time global supply chains, instantaneous digital communication.
The interval between a decision being made and its consequence being felt has been drastically reduced. Time is compressing.
How do the historical models handle that?
The neoclassical equilibrium models collapse entirely.
Yes. When time compresses, the system experiences radical instability. The need for margin reorganization spikes aggressively because errors propagate faster.
If you assume perfect information in equilibrium, you cannot explain why a microsecond flash crash wipes out billions of dollars.
Or why a single blocked canal in Egypt shuts down global manufacturing in days.
Because those models plan for equivalence in a static world.
Exactly. But Deisler's framework perfectly explains stability and instability under acceleration.
Because as the interval between action and consequence shrinks, the system's memory must process signals faster.
And the margin must be deeply integrated into the architecture to absorb the rapid shocks.
So if a highly compressed system has stripped away its margin in the name of efficiency, it loses its capacity for continuity the moment uncertainty strikes.
Exactly, which is why Deisler's model scores a 10 on capacity to model time compression.
This realization is profound. We have covered an immense amount of ground today.
We really have.
We dismantled the illusion of boundaries, starting with a single cell, and realizing that survival is about emergent configurations.
We looked at the rabbit dodging the fox, discovering the universal biological mandate that systems must act under uncertainty.
Using memory to secure a margin, we scaled that up to human societies. We saw that corporations are true operational units maintaining continuity through structured memory.
And finally, we decoded the massive distributed brain of the market.
We saw prices as condensed signals, interest rates as the mathematical cost of time travel, and evaluated centuries of economic thought.
Only to realize that the fundamental mechanism driving it all is the desperate need to survive tomorrow.
The structural regularity simply cannot be ignored. Whether you're a single biological cell, a multinational firm, or the architect of global monetary policy, you are inextricably bound by the tension between action, memory, and the unforgiving uncertainty of the future.
Absolutely.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, we want to bring this massive unified theory of everything right back down to you, the listener.
Think carefully about your own individual life. Your time, your energy, your career, your relationships.
We live in an era characterized by extreme time compression and a relentless cultural push for optimization.
It is a world that demands 100% equivalence. We are taught to schedule our calendars down to the minute,
To embrace just-in-time delivery for our needs.
to maximize every ounce of productivity. We are actively taught to view any slack, any idle time, or any surplus as inefficiency.
But through Deisler's lens, that inefficiency is the very margin keeping you alive.
So ask yourself, in the pursuit of a perfectly optimized life, have you engineered the margin completely out of your existence?
And if you have, what exactly happens to your continuity when your environment suddenly inevitably changes?
It's a sobering thought.
It really is. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We hope this conversation gives you a powerful new lens to look closely at the hidden structures operating in your everyday life. The artificial boundaries we draw aren't real, but the biological imperative to survive tomorrow absolutely is. Until next time.
Could you tell your sonny que me cuesta? Tú es otra son en toda punta. Strong leader son que se fonda. Tú me cami también y se pensa. Bitter for your water pasa punta. Bitter cause I come out of picture. 사대적이 come to the book. 소라 잡아 놓은 쇠를 가벼. And stirs down the mysteries the mind. 끝나던 the way the non-dented. And stirs down the mysteries the